The idea of this session is to present the pod's proposal, get feedback from you guys, share about what it means, why we're doing it, what it's supposed to be, and how do you become a pod in a very short time. And obviously, the idea is to spend half of the time going about some background material if you don't have the context, and then half of the time spend on Q&A and discussions and open questions to you guys as you learn more about it. So just to ground people to where is it coming from and why we are doing it and what challenges we are trying to solve. As we've gone through the morning and Juan sessions and probably heard that before, we have a master plan that we are following. We started with capacity. We were very focused about getting capacity and building the network, and we're very successful because we were very focused about that. And once we got to that level, we decided to switch to demand. And as you know, Filecoin can be looked at as a marketplace. And as a marketplace, there is a supply side and a demand side. So we nailed the supply side and we moved to the demand side. And when we moved to the demand side, we had this event nucleation that happened a couple of years ago, which had its pros. We became more modular. We have a bunch of teams that are independent, they are focused, they are decentralized, and able to move at their own pace. However, as we move to those various teams, there were some cons associated with it, and in terms of the lower alignment between those teams, and how do we coordinate between them. Those two main challenges kind of caused some delay in our ability to reach product market fit that we all desire to get to. So we'll dive a little bit more about that. But before we do, I want to give them like some concrete data, some ground data about what is this delay means of where we are today. So today, if you look at some of the important signals that we're looking at, the metrics that we look at as ecosystem, how much data is onboarded to the chain, to the network. As we looked into how our effort, our funding is allocated across teams, the activities that the teams are doing, the gaps that we have in our product from talking to customers and understanding their needs as we started doing, we continue to do, and more closely in the last few months, the gaps that they have told us, what prohibit them from onboarding and using the service. and the interaction that we had with on-ramps and how we get alignment with them, and making sure that we have both contribution on both sides to the ecosystem. All of this also created a challenge for our funding team to make sure that we make the right funding decisions to the right teams, to the right activities. So in order to us to move forward, we have to always remember the customers. And the whole idea behind this whole activities that we're talking about is to make us focus about the customers, the clients, the users, and how they feel about using Filecoin. It's not just about us as team, as we builders, and we build the ecosystem. We have to remember how people are perceiving Filecoin. The feedback we are getting is that they just want to use Filecoin. They love the idea, they love the vision, they're hooked into it, but they want to feel a product that they can use, they can trust, and that works for them. So as we move forward, let's remember that. So what does it take to reach PMF? We keep saying PMF, it's important, it's needed, but what does it mean? How do we get there? And really just at the basic level, PMF means that we have to be focused on the market and the product that we are building and make sure that it fits. So to do that, we really have to start thinking about the beginning, which is the market. What market are we addressing? And we had really great sessions today. We are zoning into that much more than I feel than before. We are very concrete about who are the users that we want to target. What kind of use cases really fit Filecoin? It's going from a very passionate and interesting vision to a more execution level. What does it mean? So we define the market, we define the use case, the customers, the users, the persona, whatever you want to call it. And then we define what is the product that they need, because it's not just about defining the use case. Now we have to define, okay, so what is the product that they need? How do we differentiate? How do we win versus our competition? How do we make it usable for them? And eventually, we need to build it. And once we build it, we need to operate it, right? The SLA is important as much as just shipping it. So we have to have the culture and the discipline to build what we customers want and continue to operate it and not, deprecate things that people actually need, but we don't know that they need them and use them. So we have to make sure that we are very conscious about those things. And this is a proposal, and there's nothing new here for people who come from other industries or other places. There is a kind of a development workflow, which is start with a market requirement documents, and then product requirements, and then system design, going into coding, launching, and operating. So this is just a very traditional way of making development in a product and market-led type of companies and organizations. And these are kind of the artifacts that are the outcomes of each of these steps. And it's very useful to think about development in those type of progress. It's really zoning us into rich product market fit. So, at least as I joined Filecoin, coming from large organizations, Web 2, and even one Web 3 large organization, really find it interesting to see the Filecoin ecosystem and its uniqueness. It's maybe not the only one. It's not the only one, but it's really unique in it's not just building a decentralized product or solution. The organization itself is decentralized. So having those two elements together is really introducing interesting challenges. And at least for me, it was very interesting to think about how can we solve some of those challenges in the most efficient way. So if you look at traditional companies, centralized companies, they have centralized corporate strategy. It's a top down. There's a top down of what the company should accomplish, what should do. And here in Filecoin, we have a shared mission. We want a decentralized, efficient, and robust foundation for humanity's information, which is very powerful and very important to align all of us into the same vision and mission. But then when we go into the execution layer, we look at traditional companies. They have their own metrics, their OKRs, the system that they use to get all the teams and all larger corporations aligned. We introduced that recently, the shared public metrics that are important for us as an ecosystem. That's a great step forward in getting everybody, all the teams aligned. And we also have a shared token we all care about. We had a very good discussion about the token itself. This is also another element of alignment that we should appreciate and value. But as you look at the execution on the engineering, product, go-to-market, how actually a team work in a central organization, it's kind of a hierarchy of all the engineers report to the same chain, and then all products are reporting to the same chain. It's for many reasons, it's this way, and go-to-market it's separate of that. But then when you look at large organization, they have a concept called business unit, where a group of engineers and product people and go-to-market sit together in a certain business unit, not necessarily reporting to the same person, but they have a shared goal of reaching PMF for a specific use case or market. So the question is, what it is for us? How do we do that? We kind of currently don't have that kind of capability. We have certain teams that are individualized. They are independent, but they not necessarily have all the skill sets that are needed to reach PMF. So some teams are much more technical focused, a lot of engineers in them, but not a lot of go-to-market people or product person. And some teams are just go-to-market and don't have engineering. So how do we build this mechanism to connect the R&D to the developer experience or customer experience, and including on-ramps as well? How do we get those teams to work together to really reach a PMF? Because again, the focus is the customer. How do we provide the best product for a specific customer or client or user? So what we did initially, as Juan mentioned in the first session today, is really understanding where we are. And how do we operate? And looking at the teams, we mapped the maturity level that we have on the markets that were defined by us initially, and what kind of capabilities they need in each market. Because if you look at the markets and the products, each market needs their own product. So how do we make it? How do we know if we are matured enough to win a market? Because if you're looking from a point of view of a customer, they are only in one vertical. And the reality is that we have a lot of pieces across many markets, but we don't have a really a specific winning product that we can say, this is exactly what this use case, this persona, this user is our target market, and we want it. We have the product for it and the go-to-market for it. And what we did is to figure out why. Why is it happening? So when we look at the maturity of the markets from an organizational perspective, how many people in our ecosystem are actually working on each of those functions into a specific market, we see that this map is also showing that we have some people across, but it's really hard to build and win in a competitive market, the storage market, if you're not really focused. So that's kind of another view of where we are today. So taking that into mind, the question is, okay, so what could be a way for us to operate together in a way that it's not disruptive, but still getting us to be focused and aligned across domains, across markets, and across products. So the proposed solution I want to introduce today is the pod framework. So pods is a just interesting word. It's come to describe a group of people coming together, a group of teams coming together with a shared goal around the same market, the same persona. So it's kind of like a working group that we're all familiar with, but it's not exactly that. There's some differences between the working groups that we have today and what pods specifically are. So pods are, if you can think about them as a customer-facing, a market-specific, vertical group of people who comes together with a mission to win it. So we take people with a different skill set from different teams, and we make them work together to make sure that we have all the domains needed to reach PMF. So we need a product manager, we need a go-to-market person or a team, we need engineering people, and operations to bring them together to make sure that we don't have gaps in the execution to win PMF for that vertical, for that user. The way to make those teams work together is to have them share the same priorities, to make sure that their roadmap and activities are aligned, they are coordinated. They have resources planned in that level, and it's not necessarily has to be just internal teams. It could be also every team in the ecosystem could be part of a pod, part of an initiative to support a market specifically. We also wanted to introduce a way to operate those pods. So pods is a framework, right? It's an idea, it's a working group style of thing, but then how do they operate? How do they report the progress? How do make quarterly planning or yearly planning? And for that, we started a few processes, the WBR, which is a weekly business review, which is a way for us to measure our progress and highlight risks and challenges and blockers on a weekly basis, together with a QBR, which is quarterly business review, which is what we did in Berlin in the beginning of the quarter, which was, okay, so what are the teams are doing in the context of a pod or market on the next quarter. And ideally, we aligned it to a yearly planning process where the quarterly planning and reporting is based on how we make progress toward the yearly goals. And again, the idea is to engage all the partners, all the teams across the ecosystem. It's really a great tool that can help on-ramps as well to be successful in this process. Yeah. So how does it look like? So this is a kind of a concept of a pod. We have all the relevant domains for that market. It could be different across markets, but in general, there's a product team, engineering team, SREs, which are responsible for operations, go-to-market, and customer experience people like customer support or operations as well. So this is kind of one part. There could be multiple parts that we are working at, right? We had a discussion about multiple markets. How many markets do we really want to focus on? And that would determine how kind of a cross-pod view would look like. So there's the demand side, where these are the users that we want to support, and we had a good discussion. We started discussion. It's really require a lot of work and analysis to figure out what is the right market for us to go after. So we are working on it. It's something that we should continue to work. We already have few in flight, you might say. We're already serving the Web3 ecosystem with builders. We already do support open, big, large data sets. And we also have the other side of the marketplace, right? The storage providers or the service provider pod, which is what we heard today is one of the challenges that the teams that are working on the storage provider side of things don't really have access to those storage providers. They don't know what they need. They don't hear about their needs. They sometimes deprecate things that they use, and sometimes they build things that might not need it. But because they are lacking this connection, this go-to-market side for those storage providers. So, yeah. So there is storage providers, for example, missing go-to-market. We just talked about it in the previous sessions, and obviously we have to align our go-to-market to engineering teams. But not everything is in a pod, right? Or a specific pod. There are shared resources, shared activities that are happening in parallel. For example, design and analytics. And we talked about the shared infrastructure for metrics and logs. Things like that are not actually don't need to be in a specific market. It's really shared resources that can help all the pods move forward faster, lighter, and reuse a lot of the components. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. I think it's very important because there are a lot of questions. I want to touch base on what is not a pod or what pod doesn't do, because it came up with a bunch of people with a question. So I just want to touch base on it and make sure that that's clear. What pods don't propose, the proposal doesn't include change in any of the people's current reporting structure. We're not going to, that's not the idea. We're not changing people who they report to, which team they are on. It's really more aligning the activity that the teams are doing toward a specific customer. So whatever the activity is, it was very clear who is this activity supposed to help? Why are we doing this? Why are these teams doing it? We don't create any new entities. It's not about creating new teams. It's not about removing teams. It's really not about that. It's really aligning the team activities to a specific customer. We are not trying or planning to hire new people to fill up those pods. It's really about taking the existing people, whatever they're doing now, and just align it into a specific customer. So every team would know what they are doing, who is it serving, and it will be very clear to everyone as well. It creates more transparency. It creates more making sure we don't duplicate efforts, and it makes sure that we don't have gaps as well. We are not also trying to introduce centralization here. It's not about removing the decentralization aspect of the ecosystem. It's kind of the opposite. Everybody can propose pod. Somebody can think, hey, I want to serve the data scientist who is doing AI training. So everybody can propose a pod. It's a new user. We want to support the new use cases. That's open up for everybody in the ecosystem and outside. Everybody can offer or propose an activity within a pod. It's not about centralizing it. We'll have a funding committee. We'll get into that later. But the idea is that those proposals would be evaluated in the context of the user that they're trying to serve. That's the idea behind pods. And it also doesn't really the only way to get funding. It's not about that. We know, and it's clear that there will be funding and other activities that are not specifically tied to a pod. It's not the only avenue. It's just another track to make it easier for us to plan and do resourcing accordingly.
You read that pretty especially that consumer, they give a pass on it, but kind of good. They also have question about like what our but after you're like he is side because it did a report competition about the pods not be something changes around people reporting structures or anything like that, but rather something that is more akin to a working group that we are, pretty familiar with as the foundation. So I just wanted to underscore this because we did get a bunch of questions that this slide answers. So thank you so much for clarifying that, Shuki.
Thank you. It's based on the feedback. So I'll open up for some question if anybody has a question.
So, Shuki, in your matrix, is there any particular person in a pod that has like general responsibility for the outcomes of that pod? And who would you imagine that being? Is it the product person? Like, who's going and making funding requests to Pro PGF? Who is reporting out to stakeholders? Who's the DRI for the pod, basically, as opposed to just like diffusion of responsibility across 6 people or more?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously, we are here to discuss those things. My suggestion is that will be a lead team that of a bunch of people that are responsible to make sure that the pod is successful, and a pod has the metrics for the success. For example, if we talk about the Web3 builder pod, the metrics of success is how many on-chain PL did we get, how many builders actually building on chain. So we have those metrics at that level of the pod of the customer that we want to serve. And then the leads need to make sure that all the right components, the engineering is building the right thing, the product definition is correct. We have a go-to-market, right? We have people who are making sure that we are targeting the right people, and all of this needs to work together. So a group of leadership of that pod would be responsible for those metrics.
Yeah, maybe just to speak as someone who's been working in a working group like this, especially in a world where your pod is made up of multiple companies and organizations with different funding allocations and budgets. Your leadership team, when you're going to go and make a funding proposal for like pod level funding, you need to discuss with like, all right, for the work that you need to do on behalf of this pod, what is that budget going to entail? Okay, what budget are we going to need to bring in like contractors or other resources, again, on behalf of this like multi-organization based working group? There's a lot of this stuff that we're doing on kind of the Philoz side where we're like, it needs to happen. Like, let's figure out how to bring this person on because, that's the difference between us being able to onboard these users or being able to like have an awesome demo in order to bring to this other community, or not be able to unlock that. And so it's, looking at a market, figuring out how to allocate resources against that market. What we haven't done yet, and so I think there's still a little bit, details that will probably be worked out live, is okay, when you actually bring a pod level funding proposal with say 3 or 4 companies being partially included in that funding proposal, now how are you going to govern and allocate that shared, say that budget gets approved and you're like, awesome, Web3 pod gets blah, blah, blah amount to go and execute on this roadmap for the next 6 months. And then 3 months in, you're like, actually, we don't need half of this DX work that we thought we were going to need, or we need 4 times as much DX work, more likely, than we thought we were going to need. And now how you move around within that budget, whether you are like, figuring out how to cut from other places and move things around. But I think that's one of the reasons your leadership team is going to need to like include someone from each, include leadership from each of the entities that are involved in a pod so that you can be making those kind of top level budget decisions and have budget insight into, what it takes to actually ensure you're fully resourced across the requirements of going to market in that domain.
Yeah. I was wondering, I like everything that's being said today about the customer focus, about getting ROI on the stuff we're doing and having customers onboarded and paying real fill and growing the island in 2026. All makes a ton of sense. It feels like we still haven't quite hit, not on the definitions of the market, but on the definition of what a market is. Because the different things that we're working on, some things are looking at Web3 builders. That's a market. You could also have, there's a market for large US financials who want to back up their compliance data, which is different from the market of large US financials who have an IT infrastructure and want a fast, high-speed database. it feels like this is the structure where we should be going to that next level of detail. So are we going to go to that next level of detail, or we kind of play it by ear? How are we going to actually find the pot of money that people want to spend?
Yeah, so I think you're touching on the exact point, which is basically that as these pods come to PGF programs for funding, pro PGF specifically, the view is that they're as part of that for pod level funding, right? Again, there are other mechanisms or tracks within pro PGF that fund evergreen sort of solutions or experimental tooling or just random projects that are not related to pods. But for pod specific ones, the view is that as part of that application process, you're producing what we call an MRD, which is basically looking to size and sort of create a perspective on what the actual opportunity there is. And so I think it was helpful during Tim's session for us to kind of spitball of it table to table to kind of say, like, what are some interesting ideas? And so that's kind of the genesis point of when you would start to think about, well, actually, this idea around CCTV is interesting. Like, all right, go do the work of producing an MRD and sort of a thinking around that, and then apply for pod level funding at a pro PGF level. So that's where that level of rigor to actually identify and size that market. And the other great thing is that if we start to have this be an ecosystem-wide solution set, we start to then create a lot of analyses of market opportunities that we may not even ever go after, but we're able to then have that as an asset within the ecosystem to say somebody's done the work to look at this particular thing. Here's why they decided yay or nay against it. And then others can use that to then inform ongoing proposals as they develop.
Any other question? Okay, I'll move quickly because we have some questions for you guys to get you guys engaged. I'll walk quickly. So this is an example of how a pod structure looks like. There are product people, there's engineering leads, which obviously the engineering is multiple teams, but we need to coordinate between them. We need to have a go-to-market person responsible, but again, a lot of people are involved and contributing. And so we have both a charter, there's a whole document that I can reference you to look at as a draft, but also, what's important is the success metrics of a pod. So we want to make sure that it's focused about a specific customer in mind, and as we get better at it, to your question, John, we'd be much more focused. This is broad, at least from my personal experience. We really have to be much more laser focused going forward to be successful. And actually, Tim mentioned it. As he said, it's better to win a smaller market than losing in a big market. So as more focused we will be, the more chances we have to succeed. But at the same side, we should be careful not to invest in markets that are just not big enough to begin with. So that's another thing to consider as we look at those MRDs, those documents that help create a structure around that thinking. And as I think Jenny said it in the beginning of the day, Philo's team was super focused on delivering POC. And if you can see how much improvement we expect to have by the end of the quarter in a specific vertical when we set our mind to it and we set the focus on it. So crossing finger that we'll see all of that come through in the next quarter, and we see usage and users loving it and using it.
I think just can go back to that slide. I just want to highlight, I think this kind of shows, as Molly was pointing out, as there was a galvanizing force around launching Filecoin on-chain cloud around one particular vertical, you can start to see how things have shifted in terms of the development work and sort of the optimizing around some of these key elements as a pod. And so it wasn't called a pod at that particular point, but the work around sort of pushing towards Filecoin on-chain cloud showed the value of cross-coordination across teams and how that can help to really give value creation to an overall vertical and a market opportunity.
So I think we touched it, another clarification slide that came up from people's questions. There's a bunch of information here, but the idea is, okay, so what does it mean for me? And I have a specific job or things that I'm doing, skill set that I'm focusing on. So what does it mean for me? So if you're a team leader, you're CEO of a company, then you're still responsible for what you do. That's nothing changed there. What does change, or what can be very helpful for you actually, is to be align yourself to a specific pod or a specific market that we as an ecosystem really focusing on. We really want to be successful on. That's what makes it easier for you to do be successful as leading a company or a team. And it doesn't change your day-to-day job, or, managing your people and managing your team. If you're a go-to-market person, I heard that from multiple people, it's really going to help you know who your customer is, because now we are focusing on specific customers, specific users, specific use case, doing go-to-market, targeting users, targeting prospect leads, getting the right views, making sure the conversion rates are higher is much easier when you have super clarity and focus about who your users are. If you're a product manager, you are going to know who your customers better because you're going to be focused on that one. If you won't be pulled into 10 different things, you would have a specific user type or market or persona or ICP, whatever you call it, and you are going to really know them very well. So making sure that we're building the right product for them. And if you're an engineer, then I think you would know who you're building a product for. And you know that you are building a product that is going to have impact, because there will be users who is going to use it, and you actually made an impact. So I think every engineer who builds something wants it to be used. So these builders will have the more confident that what they're building is needed. But what it doesn't change, again, is how you do your things. It's not talking about how coding is being done, how the actual marketing, go-to-market or sales is being done. It's not touching about that. It's just making focus that you are focused about a specific user or customer. Whatever you do, whoever you are, I think this is super important for everyone. It doesn't matter what your skill set is or what you're working on. And one comment, not everybody would be in a pod. Just want to emphasize that again, there are activities that are cross pods or not related to pods at all. So it is not end all, you have to be in one or not, there. It's really a proposal to align if you want to use it.
So I'm just role playing here. Let's just say I'm Sriracha or Stefan from Akave. I don't know where Stefan went. And, I'm targeting Web2 object storage. How would someone like an Akave plug into a pod, or how would they use a pod and market data from a pod?
Absolutely. Great question. So if Akave decides that they want to serve Web2 customers in the object use cases, then they should team up with the pod that is responsible for be part of it, not just join it, could be also part of the leading of that pod, and be able to make the decisions or suggestion, or being in part of a committee that makes the decision of what this market or this user needs to do. And they can also take ownership on what they want to do in this pod. They can take part in the go-to-market side of things. They can take responsibility of building some of the components, the technology. They can decide what they want to do and being part of the pod and contribute. But that would be clear to everybody that that's the work that they are doing for this pod.
I actually think there's a
Well, if they do it by themselves, they have to do everything by themselves. So the way of being part of a pod is that you're part of a bigger ecosystem. You're part of a bigger funding opportunity. So if you are part of a pod and you're doing things that we believe that is helpful for the ecosystem, for the network, then you can apply for funding. You can apply, hey, I'm going to bring that much of business or on-chain pay deals on-chain. I need to hire people. I need to hire account manager. I need to do marketing. Then that's an opportunity for funding if they are building capability technology and contributing back to the network so other teams can use, then they can get funding for it. But they can also benefit from other teams doing work for those same users, so they can benefit into their product as well. Directional contributions.
You're done. Maybe just, I think that's a really good, I think these are both really interesting questions, like both how would like an on-ramp join or create and lead a pod, and what is the benefit? I think there's a lot of benefit to finding skill sets across the ecosystem and pulling together resources that are broader than your individual team. So the incentive for forming a pod is, easier funding streams might be part of it, but a lot of that is like you're gaining access to skills and access to visibility, access to partnerships, access to other things that are broader than what you have within your single team, right? The whole point is like, you might have coverage over some subset of those areas, but not the whole stack. And you can actually go to market much more effectively with that entire stack. The win from a Filecoin perspective is like, we would love to do that together and be able to also, have the KPIs that are being created at a network level broader than what's maybe being created at an individual team or individual company level, where, for them that might be, great. What's my ARR of, funding that I brought into my company at the Filecoin pod level? It might be, what's the ARR of on-chain paid deals that are being actually put on chain? What are the building blocks that have been created that now can be used to go to market in a different market, but can reuse some of those same building blocks, and vice versa, might, gain access to building blocks or resources that might not exist elsewhere. I think this is actually a really interesting idea to, enable pods that being, taking some leadership and drive from an on-ramp perspective, where there's on-ramps who are excited to go and do that. Maybe a reason why sometimes they wouldn't be as interested is like, well, I have full coverage and full speed of operation within a single team across an entire pod set of resources. I have my own funding. Like, it's going to be faster for me to go to market within that subdomain instead of harnessing the broader resources and skills available. Oh, that became a lot louder. Anyways, I think there's pros and cons there. I will say there is, we mentioned like your day-to-day work doesn't change. There is some level of change like in practice when you are working with a more cross-functional team. There's making sure that you have ways that you are coordinating across multiple different, you can't lean on all of the things that are true within a single company or organization, because maybe 50% of your pod doesn't have access to your same G Suite application, you have to find your own ways of coordinating, and like tracking work, setting objectives, responding to problems, etc.
That actually strikes a kind of this is a rhetorical question because I don't think you have the answer yet, but it seems like one of the things that we can do here is, given that there are at least 4 pods, is try to build some infrastructure so that they can work better and have tooling. I think one of the things that we've struggled with is a lot of the tooling that we use on a day-to-day basis is aimed at organizations rather than cross-organizational coordination, and everybody's had to kind of invent their own thing. And it would be good to think about, for those of us who are maybe outside of the pods, how can we give them a set of tools that they can use not only to work internally, but the other rhetorical question I'm thinking about is, how do we make these pods transparent and visible to everybody else without burdening them with having to explain everything that they're doing? And also, how do the pods coordinate between each other? Because even though there's sort of this idea of these separate markets and products, we really have to, there's a lot of commonality here, and we don't want one of them, like, they're going to rely, the things that we really should be funding are the things that 3 or more pods really badly need, right? That if there's a commonality there, that's clearly something that we should be throwing a lot of our funding into, because the benefits of that would be proportionally higher.
That's true. I agree with your comments. One suggestion I have in this proposal is to have the working group that we have aligning it to a specific domain. So if you think about shared component or shared capabilities or even shared skill set, or even helping each other learn, if you have one person who is more experienced in marketing than another person, or in a senior engineer versus junior engineer in different pods, they can work in a specific working group because they can help each other. The same thing about component. If two pods needs to build similar component, there should be a working group about engineering sitting together and say, hey, this is what I'm building, this is what you're building, why don't we build a shared component and save time and resources? So that can be at the domain level, working group level.
About like the funding aspect of the things is that for like each pods to form, right? Like you have like different roles, different area leads, and different like individuals contributing to different areas, like all there. We as an ecosystem, as I mentioned multiple times, is like we have limited human resources. That's still very actively, we are still trying to make like Filecoin work, but like to actually like for the lack of better words, we're trying to make Filecoin work. But what I'm trying to say is like, I know what Juan was saying, and a lot of people have been saying, is like we need stronger focus, not trying to do everything. Like we market by market, maybe like we invest in 2 pods or 3 pods as the major annual strategy bet that we as an ecosystem are working, while individuals may have like public good roles to, for example, like matrix or whatever. There can be independent small things going on as well. My point is like to even do like 3 or like 2-3 pod, we don't have that many domain experts in everywhere. So is Filecoin Foundation or PLFIF plan to put funds aside to help people recruiting new talent that's needed for pod to be successful, or like what kind of the support will we be able to get from Filecoin Foundation and PLFIF, so that we want to take it into considerations and consider moving us towards a pod structure and be a part of the framework?
Yeah, so I think it's totally fair point. I think number one, in terms of the number of pods, like as it's being explained here by Shuki, like that list is illustrative, right? So the perspective here is that like we're not going to be launching all of these pods at the same time and have a bunch of different gaps. And so 100% to your point, like where do we focus? Where do we feel we have the right resourcing and the right market opportunity to go after a particular pod? It seems like we've organically sort of, made that decision around Web3. Maybe there's others that we can do. I think that's an open question that during FDS here would love to really kind of get a little bit of discussion around, and also some validation around what those might be. In terms of your question around sort of resourcing, where there are gaps, this is one of the, I think, key focuses that has started to kind of percolate, or has been percolating within the client success working group, of understanding, for especially on the non-technical side, where are there gaps that we have as it relates to resourcing that can be leveraged sort of horizontally across pods, and then figuring out pathways via funding to support the hiring of those individuals to support. There's an open question around sort of where those individuals sit from an entity standpoint, because again, going back to Shuki's point, we don't want to be hiring people into net new entities and all of these sorts of things. But I think the view is that like if as part of this pod effort, we realize there's a massive gap in, let's say, go-to-market resourcing, PLFIF and hopefully other sort of teams will see that as an opportunity to hire into that gap to help sort of support and buttress the relevant pods, especially if we're proving out there's a market opportunity.
One call here is just like, let's doing the market research, forming the pod, and then finding the right skills, talent, and like all the recruiting takes time. And I just want to like, how can we move as a community, as an ecosystem, like moving fast? Not like fast, like we rush everything, that we don't build the right product, but as in we don't keep spending time on planning, aligning, like try to execute. We gotta execute and ship something. So I think when folks are here, try to workshop with people that are on the ground, has been trying to execute and ship things, get their feedback on how this framework can better support them, and then to see where we spend like focus on like transitioning will be very important, rather than just like, I don't want people to having this conversation and then going back home is like, okay, it's irrelevant to me again.
Yeah, 100%. We don't want it to be sort of perfection, to sort of like in terms of the pod needs to have all these resourcing, otherwise it doesn't work. Like clearly there's an opportunity to have the work of shipping towards a particular market on a product side, with there being gaps, with the goal of filling those gaps as we start to get clarity in the market of this actually works and we need to build against that. Again, this is a framework that will help us as we start to see green shoots on a particular product or a market to then start to understand how do we fill. And so definitely I'm not trying to, at least I'll speak for myself, not trying to see this as this is the only way we can go to market is if all of these things match up and align. That is not the sort of intention here.
One observation that I have is because one of you or probably both said something around like naturally this Web3 pod emerged organically and so on. I feel like that's actually a very good case study because it is, in my opinion, it isn't a Web3 pod that emerged. FOC was a product that a group of people were working on, and they decided that a market that is worth exploring as the first market, because as I understand, it's not the only market, it's the first market, will be Web3 builders. So it is not that we created a Web3 pod. We had a group of people very engaged in building a product. They decided to go after this market. They are, I don't think, experts in Web3 pod. They are not Web3 pod. At best, they are FOC pod, which would be probably like paid market deals pod, right? Or paid deals. It is not a. I think that the classification here by the industry is very different to what actually happened. So if we went down the route of like, okay, we have a paid market pod or, you know, a medical data research pod or something pod, that it would be more reflective of what we do day to day.
Yeah, can I respond directly to that? I think it's a great observation. And the way to think about these is not as like they're mapped to the markets, and that's intentional, but they shouldn't really be organized by market as much as by product. Think of these as a product group. Now, of course, that product group needs to be looking at a specific market in which they're building the product for. And ideally, they should not have overlap with some other pod looking at some other product, right? And so in practice, we will have a one-to-one mapping between pods and products and markets. But I think your point is very good, which is like, remember, these are like product-oriented pods, and titling them maybe should make that much more clear of like, this is a specific product they're going to build, because the goal is not to get a set of people to sit together and think about a market. It's to get a set of people to actually build a product to deliver success in that market.
Sorry, just to follow on from what Juan is saying, because I strongly agree with that. The thing that is kind of why it's important from my perspective is that it's very hard for me to say, oh yeah, we in Fiddle work with this market segment. We will have expertise in this market segment because we are working on a certain product, but we might have expertise also in another market segment because we're delivering there. But for instance, what happened to us, we got like pigeonholed into the web to large data because that's kind of part of what we do, and we've been very focused on it. But we have a whole different set of things that we're doing with SPs, for instance. So should we now be probably part of SPs if we are going with the taxonomy? So just like, easier to understand.
That's a great feedback. And one more clarification. You can contribute to multiple pods or specific users, but the idea is that to help prioritize your team efforts. So how much time and how much resources should you allocate for this specific user versus this specific user? That's the idea. It's not about saying, oh, you have to be in this pod and that's the only pod you have to be. No, your team is contributing to multiple different users, different personas, different products. Then you are part of a multiple pod in that case. But again, the idea is to prioritize for a specific user in a market or product.
Thank you for calling that out, because like I think even like product can be I understand market, product, like PMF very important, but like I see like the Filecoin Chain Call or the FS working group being used as an example a lot. I feel like we actually come together, like
starting with not like a product idea. It's like we have the shared goal. Like we have a North Star of the year, which is like bring more deals on chain. And then we have an aligned mission, which is like keeping more value flow within the Filecoin economy, bring things on chain. Do we have a product at the time when we first built this? Not necessarily. We basically we build and we learn and we figure and like we talk to the users, we get the feedback, and then we figured, okay, what we are building, like putting things on chain, the easiest to understand and what want to use that is like Web3 builders is like if we want to launch with something with like quick a fast integration that people can use right away, that's like a couple like ENS or like trustless like agent that's IPFS users is the fastest we can do. That's why we decided to say that's our first targeted user group. Are we building a product? No, we are still building like protocol layer and tooling layer. Are we building a pin.falcon.dev cloud? It's a demo, not like a product. So we are not still building a product. But do we want to? We want to eventually. But what I'm trying to say is like people actually, we put people together for a shared goal, that a mission that we feel like is very important for Filecoin, and we got alignment from people like Phil B or like Filecoin Beam and so on and so forth. A lot of team pivot their priority to work towards the goal that we agree to, not like we're genius and know the product since day one. We are still trying to figure it out. That's why I think that's very important. It's like even have a shared goal that's important for the Filecoin ecosystem, and come together and building towards that goal is a strong focus, and like align and coordinate at the working group or pod level is very important. And we pull the right skill set. For example, Fiddle, we all care about having good SLAs with like on-chain matrix and making everything on-chain auditable or like attested. Sure, we can use your skill set. You have the capacity. We have an aligned goal. We can be a part of. We can be this in the same pod working group. I think that's a good description of this.
I think it's crucial that there is like a short-term mission. Otherwise, like it would kind of be more of a working group kind of thing, which is probably not what you want to do here. So like it needs to be like this is the goal. Like we need a particular set of people for this. Ideally, it's a very limited amount of time, which also kind of forces you to think about the mission better, because like if you have 1 month to do it, like then you would actually make sure that it's really scoped. Especially because like honestly, like the context is so the context surface is so huge that there is no way of onboarding another engineer now. Like it's gonna take 3 months for anyone to actually get like good enough context. So ultimately, we should think it from the perspective of we have a limited resource pool right now. How do we kind of focus these resources into like the highest impact initiatives that we have?
The idea about the pods is not initiating new teams or changing what people are doing right now. It's more about how do we make teams understand the users that they're going after. So it's not about onboarding a team into a pod. It's more about, okay, so what is your team doing right now? Which user is trying to help with? What kind of work are they doing? Are you building code? Are you building go-to-market? Are you defining a new product? Are you trying to get after a new market? Each of those things is different work that you're doing. So it's more about mapping what you're doing to a specific user in mind. It's
Yeah, I understand, but ultimately it's gonna lead to like the product roadmap adjusting towards that user, towards
That's
that
right.
goal. And when I say like you're creating a pod, you're basically aligning a group of people to build a thing which eventually is going to be a product. And I'm saying that that's great if it's like super short term, like a couple of months. Like otherwise, like it gets into this, oh, I'm working on whatever, like Web3 developers. Like sure, like we all want to work on Web3 developers, but ultimately it needs to be like very confined, very scoped, very like narrow.
So the projects are specific, are time bound, the project that you're working on, but the user that you're trying to target should not be changing every project, right? If you are targeting specific Web3 developers in the DeepIn type of use case, that doesn't change. We just build more stuff, more products and more services around that. So the focus about how to build, reaching them is.
I understand. I just saw like many working group style of things, and I know that like they're not super impactful. So I'm trying to say that like either it's something that is super focused on a particular like objective, needs to be very short term. Otherwise, it's just it dilutes because like ultimately you have different teams. Like we are really different teams. Like we don't meet every day, and like you try to like either like make it super short term, like we have a sprint towards like a particular goal, or it's not gonna feel like a team like long term. Like that's my point. That ultimately it's a very different like environment in which we are working, and and those teams are different cultures, different like ways of working. So like it needs to be super short term and super scoped in order for this.
Thanks. Sorry, I've just been trying to have a microphone for like hours. I want to talk. I'm still processing this one pod, one product idea, and I'm trying to map it in my head because we have a lot of products in this ecosystem. Singularity's a product, Akave's a product, Ramo's a product, Fock in some ways is a product. It's a building block of other products. Please build on Fock, please. But like, but it's a product as well. And so from that model, if every product is a pod in practice, then we have a problem of way too, stood up with 5 pods, we have like 40 fucking pods, and that is a problem, and that's not viable, because we Boost is still a fucking pod at this point, if that's our model, and no one works on Boost, we know this. So I guess my question would be if like part of this should be trying to dedupe initiatives that are working on products that are going after the same go-to-market approach, and they might have multiple products under a heading. Realistically, Fock has like 4 products inside of it in practice. And so maybe in that world, a pod is a community of products that are going on shared go-to-market pathways.
Jimmy said, update. It is series box. The daughter and archival storage. And then Ramo can be joined by whoever wants to do archival storage or paid market deals or something.
I think the organizing principle here should be closer to something like 2 pizza-sized teams with singular ownership of a product. The problem is when a product ends up spanning multiple teams and then nobody really owns it and nobody has authority over it. And so you want a single product to be owned within one pod. Sure, one pod could have 2 or 3 products, not recommended, but fine. But ideally, you don't have one product being spread across multiple teams. And like, that's the more important thing. It's like small teams. Small teams, highly focused, with full autonomy of being able to pursue that product and that market and being able to deliver everything they need. Sometimes they might have to use somebody else's product, right? So like you might have a pod here depending on the Fock pod. But you should be careful about that, and you should be trying to minimize dependencies where possible.
Yeah, and if you focus it on the objective, then like it kind of comes organic that you have like multiple products, because like you need still cars, Filecoin, and stuff like to actually make stuff work.
Yeah, this is great, Felix.
Yeah. The point of that challenge is that when you say that each team works on and apply or whatever you call it. All serious. We are over.
It's very hard.
You doing after? I'll tell you inside your soul when I pick my butt to you. Well,
While we are talking this, I would love to get everyone's feedback and ideas. It looks like there's a lot of questions and suggestions and things you might think it can help, and maybe some not, and great suggestion about objectives and making sure that we are focused. So there's a notes document. If you can write your questions, your comments. There is a bunch of kind of preloaded questions, but for you guys to answer. But also, please add your questions as well, so we can follow up on that. And I'd love everyone's feedback, and it's great feedback.
Yeah, I wanted to build on Vuk's point, which is, for example, if there's going to be funding tied to helping a particular pod, what does success look like? Because there's obviously a lot of things that people might see as success, and who determines what's successful. So hypothetically, let's just say Falk takes over 90% of all Web3 builders, right? Like, imagine that universe, right? Is that success, or are we at the same time also trying to get large paid deals of a certain amount coming in at a volume? And we might see that the time horizon for using Falk for Web3 developers might take a longer horizon, even though we have somewhat of a market adoption. So I just wanted to like start the discussion on like how you think about success as pods too, because I think that's also key in how the right resources are assembled, but also the incentive of why someone is excited to join a pod, because they want to move that metric, like Jenny had said, around, hey, we want to bring more users on chain, or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's up to us as an ecosystem to decide as we allocate resources, and also about what the pod is thinking they can do and what they're committing. So we have metrics that we decided that are important for us, for our ecosystem. So it's onboarding data. It's about getting clients with more than 1 terabyte of active data. It's getting paid deals on chain, and there should be numbers, specific objectives. How is this pod going to improve in the next quarter, few quarters, or a year? So allocations of resources will help the team focus on reaching those goals, those metrics. So that's up to the pod to decide and for us.
It sounded like there's mixed ways that people are using the word product here. One's being used, like some people are referring to like a jobs to be done framework of like, why would this customer buy this thing? In which there can be multiple products that would satisfy that, right? Like a cheeseburger and a chicken sandwich both serve, they're hungry and want something, to eat. Then the other way is the burger is its own product. The chicken sandwich is its own product, right? So people are using those in two different ways, and it's confusing the conversation, I think. And then if you're thinking about like success metrics for something like this, this is it feels like the de-risking framework of like product-led teams, like Marty Kagan's work. So you have like de-risking, is this usable? Is this viable? Is it valuable? Is it technically feasible? And that's what those roles serve, right?
Yeah.
So you can de-risk in your success metrics by breaking down across the cycle and de-risking through validation stages, right? So you might say, we want to measure success as how many total experiments or things can we validate to this set of people with a need? So when you say like the File Plus, the real big storage ones, okay, what are the needs they have? Can we prioritize them properly? Can we make MVPs to validate something? And those aren't necessarily engineered or anything. Probably shouldn't be, right?
That's right.
And then you compare across, so you say, well, what is the cost per successful validation? Okay, and then you move to next stages. So I would suggest staging through this process, because it's totally a product validation process and not really an engineering process or full product building, if you think about it as like...
Yes, it's not just engineering process. It has a market process, it has a product process, and engineering process, and they are iterative. It's not just a waterfall. It's continuously improvements across all these domains, but they are in that order, which are much important.
I'd frame it as a de-risking process.
That's a great framing. Yeah.
I actually want to comment to that as well, because I was going to say, like, to Clara's point, why would someone want to join the pod? Because we're already so busy, right? And we're trying like, oh, leave me alone. I gotta I gotta survive. Is like, where you can help and the team can help is exactly what you're saying, is helping us validate.
Yes.
Right? Because like we're talking to like some startups and there's some great ideas, and we're also like, okay, well, should I invest in this? And market is going in that direction. Like I'm bringing up X402, for example, for data monetization. And it's like, great, because we had a long conversation about that. But does anyone else see that? Can you help us like put like a hypothesis together? Like we can just write it down. Can you help like with reaching out to other customers? And can this become a blueprint versus going after the same, which we need to do anyway. But this to me, I see as like, can you help us on the research? Can you help us on the validation? And those are
Absolutely.
the big value props for me.
Yeah, just to continue building on this, like I really like the de-risking kind of idea. I also feel like we're very naturally looking at this through the framework of an engineering culture, and this is the other bits of it. And so I see these things rather than being a way of organizing engineering as a way of resourcing the connection between customers and all of that information that I know everybody is kind of like really hungry to have. So maybe there's a way of thinking about this as well, that this is something that can provide resources for pre-existing engineering projects and steer them, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great framing as well.
Yeah.
I like it. Thank you.
Like one benefit, even though I have a lot of questions in the past couple of weeks, but one benefit.
You can ask until they take me out. I don't know how much time I have.
But
I'm here.
one of the benefit I do see since like day one, when I first time I heard about that, it's just like the funding thing. Is like you make a bet on a market, on a product you use, and there's like network level funding for this initiative, for this effort. I think that's like super useful because then you coming together with the skill set it's needed, and as the person that's like either like leading the pod or coming together to working on this initiative, individuals can worry less about other individual members in the pod. They will just like, because of like funding process, whatever, they have to like leave the initiative because they didn't get another round of like pro PGF or pro PGF or retro PGF, or like pro PGF didn't work fast enough, and then there's like a 2 months like funding bridge gap or whatever, and then these people is like, oh, I'm not getting paid, I'm just gonna pause the work. That pod can solve that, right? Because at least you have some like pod level funding that you can fund the resources that's most important for your initiative, and for that I do see a benefit of that, and the pod will be able to decide the building the software or the infrastructure, the human beings that's like necessary to be successful, and making sure those are funded and
Absolutely.
So I do see that benefit for individual teams and also individual to spend less time worrying about, do you guys still have another 3 months in this ecosystem or not, rather than putting that at the network initiative level.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the work we've been doing in the last few months. Team UC has done research about various markets. We are building the case to make more investment and make more product definition that can be done by various existing teams. And it's validated. We are validating the hypothesis that a specific use case is relevant for us. And we do a lot of product discovery calls that feeds into that mechanism. So we are learning what customers want, and that would drive into MRDs and PRDs. And then all the engineering teams have a basis of what they need to build and how we should build it.
So something that occurs to me after what Angela said and Joe is that actually so I think I'm getting it now. So there is like market segment, and some teams like let's say Ramo, because it's a good example. Ramo decided to go only after the like archival data, basically web to large data sets, right? So they will only probably fit into that pod, and they can run experiments within that pod. And so this is like a framework for saying, hey, if you want to experiment with a certain market, there is a group of people that is already like working in this market and also experimenting. So you can kind of connect with the same people and be part of that structure. And so like, if that's the case, then I think it's a little bit easier, so that we don't feel the need to or expectation to form a pod, but rather to join a pod, which is very different. And then probably someone who is perpetually just targeting this market will be the one taking a lead on that market versus someone who targets different markets and experiments. I think that sorry, I'm going to be quick. With that, a challenge that we have today is that we started with the very beginning with the MRDs and PRDs, and we have a million projects and experiments in flight, and all of a sudden, do we like backtrack and document something that we are already like down the coding, or do we just say no, these projects are fine, but if you have a new experiment, then start with that? Because
Yeah, that's a good question. So for your first comment, my line of thinking kind of broke, but the second one was, yes, I think what we want to do is be a little bit more disciplined about that. So we are a train moving, right? It's hard to catch a moving train right now. So we have what we have in flight, but as we go forward, it will be very helpful that we go, my suggestion, my proposal is to go in this direction, to be focused on customers, on markets, and building the right product for them. As we go forward, it's a process. It's not easy to do for organization that exists for a while and is doing the things that they would know how to do right now. So, but I think we all understand that we need it. We need to reach PMF, and this is a proposal how to get there. And now I kind of came back for the first comment. I think a lot of the discussion that happens about the organization, what I feel at least, is very engineering focused. And a lot of people, some people have a lot of experience is go to market and been, doing go to market outside of Filecoin, but there's a missing piece that not a lot of people talking about what happens before you start building something. How do you do this market research? How do you do this product definition? And this suggestion is putting a little bit more highlights on those activities before we start the engineering work. So that will help us.
Okay. So MPG, to your point, I think 100% the intention here is not to create a unnecessary friction for things that are in flight. So the view is if you're, have something you're building and you feel that you have confidence that this is a sort of pod level scope, that there is space and a place for that to be applied for funding. I think one thing to Shuki's point, I think something that I think all of us have felt in the ecosystem, and Danny, it's something that you alluded to a bit earlier, is that trying to instigate more product-driven thinking and validation around opportunities is one of the goals of this. And so one thing that I find pretty exciting about this is if as we start to promote and market a funding pathway for more product-centric ideation and development around opportunities leveraging Filecoin, I see that as a pathway to attracting net new builders in, where if I'm a product person who has a vision for something built around data storage and can come to a vehicle to basically sort of validate that opportunity or not within the ecosystem, like that to me is very exciting versus having to do something more in a classic startup sense of, hey, I'm going to go build an entity, put a pitch deck out and hopefully go for the best, or bootstrap something in a more traditional sense. And so for me, that's what helps us to kind of illuminate more net new builders coming in who have opportunities and ideas around markets. And then I think to your point that you said earlier is like one of the things around the way we're thinking about the funding mechanism for this is that it is meant to be iterative and sprint driven. It's the idea is not, hey, you're going to work on Web3 storage. Here you go. Good luck. See you out there. It's more of, hey, like you're going to go work on this based on this sort of development workflow. Here's what the next pieces of what you need to deliver are. Did you deliver those or not? What are your learnings? And then going from there to scale out and build. And again, like the perspective here is that pro PGF or PGF funding is not the only way these pods can be funded, right? Like they can go out and look for other ways to be funded or form as they sort of develop overall. But the idea for us is that this is a organizing force to help us just think more in a market product driven perspective.
If you take the idea that you're de-risking, right? And there's two types of risks to building these new economic models that are profitable and people will use. So one's execution risk. Can we actually follow through and do the thing? Another is market risk, like is it buyable, right? And all of these roles here in the pod are basically like de-risking from an execution risk standpoint. And so what you're actually offering as a service here to the ecosystem is subsidizing the cost of reducing market risk, right? So any builder who can execute can come in. And that's a huge thing for an entrepreneur. A lot of the times that's what they miss, right? So when you think about reducing the cost of iterating and prioritizing the most valuable ideas to a segment of potential users, buyers, then you can think of it as like, okay, how low can we make the cost of subsidizing that market risk, the removal of market risk, right? So think about success metrics like that.
I'm just flagging that we're way over time. Very accurately, we have run over an entire other session, and now we're in the closing. However, there's something that we need to do related to this stuff, working groups, markets, whatever it is, that's important for later, later in FDS. What we want to get to is like a narrow, focused set of initiatives that we as a community are pushing our time and energy and resources into, and that we then work together across multiple different teams to make those things happen. You know, the classic more wood, fewer arrows, but less cliche. Actually, equally cliche. But so we need to get there. We need to get to that point. And right now we've been using the Web3, Web2. We've been using the markets that Juan had initially kind of described as like very different types of products are needed in these markets with very different needs. And so we've been breaking out in that way. We did a sample QBR, quarterly business review, at the beginning of Q4 associated with those markets. We do not actually have pods for all of these markets, especially if we're framing those pods as like actual product level initiatives. You know, there isn't a good active like live product in actually maybe Singularity. Singularity is our large data product in production today that is used by some folks to do data preparation. I don't know if it fully works end to end right now, but like, I guess my question is, can we align on a set of whether either it's market verticals or pods or some structure that exists that we want to plan together on how we are executing and doing our roadmap? Because we have time scheduled for that on our last day together. But I worry right now that if we just divide ourselves up again into Web3 object storage, Web2 object storage, we're going to just hit the same state that we've been to before, which is like, I'm sitting in this group, but I don't actually, like, I'm not part of this pod. This isn't a pod. There's no product initiative. And so can we together here try to map the actual pods that do exist in practice, or at least the actual products we're going to take to market and put our time and energy into next quarter, or, you know, in the first half of 2026, so that we can better align and staff and put resources against those things, and so that our breakouts on Saturday, day after tomorrow, are going to be useful and not a waste of time. I would love to get a little bit, we can do some of this asynchronously as well, or some people can like stick around and we can work on this together after the closing. But like I think we've made a lot of movement in this pods conversation. I think we've gained a lot more alignment, but I think we're not quite at a place where we have the clarity we need as an ecosystem to go and take the next step, which is awesome. We're going to this group is going to double down on making a proposal back to the ecosystem for the value that it can create over the next 6 months. And here are the KPIs it's going to take on. Here are the people that are going to be involved. We're going to go and make this happen. We feel kind of ownership, and hey, maybe we're going to make a pro PGF proposal in order to get some additional funding to make this initiative happen, and we can advocate for it, versus, I don't know, just writing down a list of things that don't end up getting done, which I don't think is a good use of our time.
Shuki, do you have that list of like the goals for 2020, end of 2025 that we had, like grow the paid markets by or whatever it is, kind of success criteria? I would suggest that we can keep the structure of Web 2, Web 3, the one that we have today, but maybe we should spend time thinking in groups, self-opted, who wants to go in each group, doesn't have to be the product that you're actually working on can we create experiments or initiatives that will, in each of those pods, contribute separately to daily data onboarding, separately to clients with more than, and so on. And then look at that matrix will be pod a proposal for an experiment to achieve each one of those goals, because I don't think that each experiment will be able one experiment will be able to kind of support each one of them. And then we'll have kind of a structure where we will say, well, actually, like for web to object storage, we don't have goals or achieve all of those goals. And then, yeah, I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but
So I just feel the hot breath of Tim and Jen King and a bunch of other people going, like the point of this is to connect us with customers with, and I was going to say this before you said this thing, but I just wanted to get it back. If we loop too closely to these goals are important, but we have to be in some way the bit of wiring that we need is feedback from customers. And so I feel like that's how we should be driving the product development. So it wasn't really a response to what you were saying. I'm just saying we should to try and get this in the right frame of mind. We should lean extremely into the, like, how do we find customers? How do we iterate that? How do we do that in the pods that we are based on what we have?
And look, I think it's difficult to take a new operating model and try to refactor a whole range of teams into it before people have a good experience of how to work with it. I really would pick 2 or 3 pods and develop those really well and have them working extremely well over the next quarter, and then show how to do it to other teams. I don't know that I would try to refactor. Like I think it's good to do the exercise of figuring out what possible pods might exist and also show where we're misorganized, right? So for example, having a team trying to do client development that it does not own a product to deliver it. Like we've tried that for many years. We know it doesn't work and we're still trying to do it. And it's like, great. We should be organized around specific products being delivered into a market. However, I don't know that you can get everybody to like realign into this operating model before showing how it works really well on like 1 or 2 teams. Or 3. I think 3 is like the right number.
Yeah. On Dennis' point, so it should be like driven even without like customers. It should be like, oh, there is a deal already waiting for some kind of implementation, and this is what needs to be done in order to like unlock this deal. If there is some market research, market ideation, like we're already done there. Like we've been doing that for years, and like ultimately it's just not going to work, especially in a distributed context. So it needs to be, oh, this is whatever 100 petabytes, and like this is how much value is going to be captured by the network, and this is what needs to happen for this to be unlocked.
I wanted to jump in really quick on what Juan said and then go back to this concept of this Web3 pod trial we've done, which is my favorite part about the Web3 pod was we went through a massive process in this ecosystem of a lot of teams becoming way more independent and then working back together. And I thought the success of the Web3 pod so far is everyone in that group getting the DNA and muscle memory of, hey, this is how I can work effectively, feeling like a cross-functional team in a working group style to sprint after a particular goal. Because I think if we don't have that instinct or ability culturally to work like that, it's just going to be really hard for us to get into formation for all kinds of pods. But I also think that we're still experimenting with the Web3 pod. I don't want to say pod, the Web3 pod, that the FOC pod, because we still haven't necessarily seen the outcomes of that yet. So that was kind of my point. Is I think there's like an element of just people organizing to work well effectively together, alongside with making sure we can get the right outcomes we want.
Yeah, ultimately it feels that we have a problem of like lacking the talent density in particular like objectives, and that we kind of spread like the same amount of talent across like many goals. And like if we have like the same number of pods as we had teams before, ultimately we would get to the same thing where we just redistributed the same resources. So the number of pods should probably be like lower than otherwise, like yeah, there is no effect.
I mean, I think we can confidently say that we are going to continue investing in Filecoin on-chain cloud. And so regardless of which market it's targeting in the very beginning of 2026, that there will be a continued cross-functional effort around that. Is there another domain where there will be a significant cross-team, cross-functional, cross product effort, or a product-oriented cross-team effort that would be another good candidate for trialing the pod structure and seeing where it works and seeing where it doesn't, and pushing it forward? Marta?
I have two proposals. One is the incentive model and that probably would fill into the SP pod, which is, that is should be a cross team initiative where we all think how to successfully build incentives and engagement probably both for clients and for SPs. So maybe these are two separate pods in a way. And this does not mean, by the way, Phil Plus.
Token holder pod.
The token holder pod, yeah. And this does not mean for me a Phil Plus pod. That means genuinely like, let's figure out how to successfully build incentives that work. And then the other one would be hearing what we discussed earlier today and what Juan was saying around public data sets. So they don't have to be large, because the large is a very fuzzy definition really, but the public open data sets and the kind of figuring the client side of it, payment side of it, finding the storage, onboarding, all the tooling around that. That feels like another kind of big initiative across multiple teams.
Yes, and I agree. I think that's exactly the idea behind thinking about the markets and the users and persona. So identifying large data sets is broad, a much more authentic or true to what we have today success is public data sets. So these are public data sets, which are very different than large data set that enterprises have. Enterprises have petabytes of data, but it's proprietary, it's on-prem, and they will not want to make it public, so it doesn't fit what we have today. So a success we have so far, if you call it a pod, is into the public data sets. And that could be, I agree, one of the parts that we have something that we're working on right now. One comment I wanted to say, I kind of hearing it from people who haven't engaged in go-to-market activities and haven't been engaged in companies that have been successful in go-to-market and making revenue and business, is how hard it is to get somebody to pay for something. It's really, really hard. It's really hard to get somebody to pay for a service or for a product. And being part of go-to-market teams and supporting go-to-market teams in the past, I can tell you that it's a very skill-based work for people in the go-to-market team to be successful. So from their point of view, they know how to target a specific user, the messaging of the website, the positioning, the cheat sheet, the type of campaigns that they need to do to attract views on the web pages and things like that. There's a lot of work that is very specific on a specific user type. So when we talk about focusing on pods, that's the idea, is that you have relationships that you're building with the specific users or subset of users, or you go to the right events, or you go to right messaging, you promote in specific places. These are very specific to a user type or market or use case. So that's something that people need to understand. It's not just building one product that serves all. That's very hard. I just want to make that comment.